28 August 2023, 5 o'clock, 18 minutes. 28 August 2023, Rio de Janeiro City. We will push a bit more, observing and invite you to please take a look. Rescue Cgqm Foundation.blogspot.com. You please take a look at the effort if you consider relevant or necessary. By the moment we are living, we will have quite clear that the effort made has an application. We are kind of doing the observation and the review, considering the computer science since 1920, because we are talking as science and philosophy, of course that belongs to no one, is something you use to connect the logical ideas and thoughts. You need to show your arguments with at least some rationality and elements that allow you avoid that advice made by Dante Passino in Italy about the problems if we have a new metaphysics, the sense in the sense of things we do. Of course that this will affect the cognitive level of things we present, and the cognitive bias go not only at the analogical relation but also at the computer science. The dishonest affect the intellectual activity in the same way, and you observe this quite clear on economy. When you in finance, when you know that something will be wrong or will be a mess, but you insist on it to obtain gains. And after have things made, of course that you had a concrete result which modify the reality you live, sometimes an entire context, conjunction, or a global architecture like we observe at the coherent thing. We observe that we have here at the Cgqm Foundation.blogspot.com, the first post. We have the model as the composition of two segments or pieces that combined form a whole thing. It's the idea of system, and in the middle we will have components on it that will carry the idea of this system as integrated as part of each one of those systems. We will check that we had here this conversation and goes like this: 100 years of problem science history we carry with mystery. 20s, 50s, 80s, 90s, and many other events going on. At the 50s, you had the John Maynard Keynes and the economy, and at the 80s you had the Cold War, the 90s the neoliberalism and ideas. And this entire thing sets the internet as the embedded system of communication. And nowadays we have this quite clear by the instruments that allow you to transfer a message all around the globe. We must understand at first that I'm not a mercenary, as told many times, but you violated creation, so creatures felt hurt. 100 years of program science will lead to two big models as mental model, considering the machine learning, the paradigm and the multi-paradigm. In general, the paradigm will be procedural, structured, and oriented. The structure will be lexical or have the syntax on it. The procedural, combining the type of structure you do and the oriented as object reference you have. We had this one before, and it's recommended to have the astrophysics group on it, because if we get something, they will be on it too. They know mathematics, other things like algebra. Multi-paradigm, you have something non-structured. And here is something kind of that she can be very good or very, trouble. 100 years of program science, the chart number one, the commentary I do is we started at the prospect of learning by sources unsourced at the 20s, and a century passed fast and we are still here, kind of doing the analysis and the research as something that 100 years ago you probably wouldn't consider that we became a science, a stream, a branch of a science, but became something scientific because it has a method on it. The paradigm will leads you to the topic. And of course that in the early days the machine can handle many topics because it was something structured and rigid, I would say. But we have conglomerates of data, and each conglomerate kind of having some way the contribution for the development of science by their own selfish purpose, sometimes probably considered a mercenary at that time. We could check that the procedural, structured, and oriented paradigm as a mental model that you have give me the possibility as syntax or a lexical reading, because I could understand that I'm having a language being structured, and I only will have, at least at these very early days, the program by a language. The multi-paradigm has something non-structured and must be necessarily non-structured, will give me the possibility as high-level program. How this go? The idea as choice wasn't planned at the early days 20, so we had the syntax as the codification. We do, and the limit was until the lexical composition as the combination between components. But since you create something non-structured and then multi-paradigm, you could have the permutation of the lexical elements, and also impact the syntax that put your system at that time with some kind of movement inside. And of course that many systems combined with movement, you have an architecture as something mobile, with mobility, I would say. We will move observing that this is basically the idea as COBOL as program language. It's a matrix oriented by pairs, very rigid, and in my opinion is the best choice for critical critical moments, especially when you have no choices. The reading multi-paradigm implied non-structured and set the array inside the matrix. because you could have the permutation between elements or pairs. And indeed, you have the ordinated pairs, but changing the coordination as structural design of things you do, and will have an impact at the American Air Force, which was observed, the NASA, the National Spatial Agency, and many other things. Which is basically interactive computer. Just like the Movetron, we have the grid. You have your rigid pattern here and something with dynamic inside. We can observe that it's the idea we have at this model, and as we told you, I didn't plan this, but the science is something universal. If you got in touch with by the sensitive things and ways, or the ways you feel things, you probably will have the same thing. At the period, the fifth John Maynard Keynes had the same idea of someone on Europe, and we are not talking about the mystery, but they had the same conclusion in different, spots, I would say. We will have the third chart and the second chart, and we will conclude something here. And we will move during the week because it's a lot of things to read and understand, and I'm trying to put things as simple as possible, as crude as possible. 100 years of program science, chart number 2, the 20s up to the 50s. Machines do not have the skills to identify scopes with the basics as Microsoft. I think that this kind of got pulverized as some kind of program language. I would say you have exclusive models with application at the lexical procedure and syntax. You have got intervals on it, and this bring to the family as ALGOL 58 procedural. It's a procedural and structural language with imperative statement, and even with the mobility inside your array of data, inside your matrix of data, the imperative statement at the segment you have allowed you, for instance, to develop the idea as Fortran IBM, which was basically generic, and we observe that is the generic up to high performance programming, amplifying the level as interaction that you have. And this interval here, we have reduced instruction set computer, which is the RISC. This kind of thing at this period, 60 up to 80s, starts the parallel computing, which is presented as this idea here as the CISC, which is a complex instruction set computer or reduced instruction set computer. We will observe that your array of your matrix of data in the early days have, after the 50s, the possibility as permutation inside, and the permutation got so big that engulfed your matrix and you abandoned the COBOL, for instance. And this was the idea as the complex instruction will kind of wouldn't be applied at the machine with reading, I would say, only based on imperative and procedure, very rigid, kind of unable to learn because it can do the permutation, but will help a lot since you put yourself outside the space of permutation. In economy, it's the homoscedasticity, which is this kind of thing here. You had the division, yes or no. and the heterosedasticity, which is the possibilities inside until we engulf the entire thing, switch the pattern. For instance, as FIFA for a criminal scheduled event in global scale. And the IBM power, it's something that I have no idea if it's for real, but the instruction as set architecture is something that exists because you can use the big data nowadays, and we use this at the credit charged legally to do not have a single source of data and allow you to do the comparative measurement by this model that we had divided on a macro process, considering the workflow with embassy for troubleshooting and have the ensured the decision as a dismantle order against the organized crime inside the institution. The organized crime inside the institution implies something like this. Your regular area, for instance, the military force in the United States, the military force in the United States with paramilitary activity or criminal activity, considering the drug trafficking, for instance, of heroin, and then they will only do drug trafficking for Spain, for whatever. It can be cocaine, for instance, like observed in Brazil. We will have, with official airplanes, we can observe that the period 50 up to 80s, the program science suffered a division, which was this idea here. The division go as complex instruction or reduced instruction, considering the type of reading as lexical or syntax that you have or has interest to use, because you had the options at that time by the contribution people did considering their own interests, and some way this developed this computer science. Rudolf von Jhering on Germany told this as the kind of the behavior of the criminal, which kind of do something by himself and for himself, but in some way helps everybody. We will observe that the program science suffered a division, and this was reflexive during the 80s and 90s, especially at the Unisys case, which was the division you had inside by that movement as permutation, which is the idea as broken window also at the 80s. And we can have that until the 50s, the directive at the program science, which wasn't a science at that time, was basically US defense. But after the 80s, the purpose became kind totally commercial. The challenge between the Deep Blue, the IBM Deep Blue, and the chess master, I think that is a Russian, goes as something like this, because the Deep Blue has the possibility here limited by the matrix, and the array can't be beyond of the matrix, because some way you must expect the hat trick that the player as chess master has to assimilate this concept and have the lexical or the syntax as program inside the reading of the machine. But once having this, you can apply many other things, including the prediction as criminal activity, as we told 10 years ago. We observe that the purpose became commercial, and this had a negative impact on Air Force USA, including the national agencies, national special agents, the NASA, and even commercial flights got affected. We will observe now this situation here. The instruction has the syntax up to lexical and can be reduced or complex. The integration of all things sets the architecture, and this kind of stochastic process of information with many other paradigms imply that you will need the lambda as something that is not the complex thing you have yet, but will be the complex thing that we have nowadays, because we are working with the construction of this, doing the review as an audit, and even if I consider, for instance, use my money to buy the IBM and AT&T, I must understand what kind of monster and trouble I will buy. We will check that this idea is something very simple that we observe on financial mathematics that goes kind of like this. You will observe that you have your money and you have the money projected at the future as a big money, ceteris paribus, regular condition. This money projected at the past is something minor, which is basically the idea as behavior that you have as possibility of your money by the index you do having the dynamic of the monetary value on time and space. This leads to exchanged market. We apply this in the way we are doing, observing the dismissal procedure by the failure you have, and you can track from the exchanged market until the gainers, considering the interfaces and the silence of all central banks and federal reserves, or for the federal reserves and central banks that always has a chair, and in the same way we observe the crisis on bank system in Europe this year and last year. For sure, the central banks are on it. Have a great Monday and week. We will keep our reading, studying, and doing our contribution for sure for the stability and tranquility that you need. But to achieve the ataraxia, you must sometimes face problems. And we are encouraged to dismantle order against the organized crime, because if criminals got the institutional level, they are inside. But how they got there and why they are still there? It's the question that no one have guts to answer until this time. But expect the order to solving the problem. Have a great